What's the first thing you decide to pack to take on any travel adventure that you go on? For me, it's my sunglasses. I can't go anywhere without my sunglasses. And I'm proud to say that today's Global Travel Channel podcast show is proudly sponsored by Sun God Sunglasses. Yes, the coolest sunglasses in the world. Now, if you're looking for a new pair of sunglasses, they're going to protect your eyes, give you the most cover you can possibly get, and have got the coolest frames and lenses out. You've got to check out the range of Sun God sunglasses. And to do that, you've got to head over to the website at www.jeanpoole.com. That's JEANPOOLE.com. And there you'll find all the amazing range of Sun God sunglasses. So get over there, check them out, and get yourself a new pair of sunglasses for your next trip. Oh yeah, sunglasses. I wonder what your thing is when it comes to sunglasses. Are you somebody that sticks with a particular brand, or do you chop and change when new trends come out? I'd like to know what your thing is with sunglasses, so why don't you drop me a note and let me know. Hi, I'm Mark Philpott. I'm the host of this Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm the lucky guy that gets to speak to all these amazing people around the world about their incredible travel adventures. And on the show so far, I've had so many amazing guests that have done things like running a marathon or kayaking around Antarctica, who have gone to see the Northern Lights, who have done photography in amazing places around the world, who have run marathons and other sports races in incredible places. Others that have changed their lives by challenging themselves to get off the couch, book a ticket, and go and do something in a faraway land. That's what the show is all about, the diversity of travel. We educate ourselves, we motivate ourselves, we inspire others to get out there, book a ticket, and go and see the world. So today's guest is none other. He's going to be teaching us about how to travel on a slight budget, because he spent the last 5 years traveling around the world and spending $0 on accommodation. How does one do that? Well, it's a growing trend. And it's also glowing as well. It's a growing trend, and it's called house sitting. Yes, my guest has been spending 5 years on the road, so to speak, in many countries around the world, and we're going to introduce him to the show right now to find out how he's done it. His name is Ryan Patey. Ryan, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Exciting to have you here. How's everything going today? Whereabouts in the world are you speaking to me from?
I'm actually just in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So I think, I'm not quite sure, but I listened to your podcast with Bridie Reed, and I guess I'm just north of her right now.
Oh, okay, fantastic. And with an accent like that, though, you're certainly not from Chiang Mai originally. So where's hometown?
I grew up in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, so kind of the furthest eastern part of the country and the continent, actually.
Wow, what a fantastic part of the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting little spot. Not a lot of people get to it, and I'm kind of happy with that. I want to tell people to go, but I also like being able to go back and, there's only like 500,000 people on an island that takes like 8 or 10 hours to drive across, so I don't want it to become a big known thing, but,
Okay, well, my show goes to 95 countries around the world, so I'm going to tell everyone, go to Newfoundland, go to the island, check it out. Look, I've been to a lot of places around the world, and I've spent a lot of time in your beautiful country, but I haven't been up to your far east corner there. I'd love to get up there. It sounds like it's a spectacular part of the world.
Yeah, it's not that, I think the problem is that it's not that easy to get to it. Like, it's an island, so you technically either have to like take a ferry, which I guess now, back in the day when I was young, it was like overnight, probably I think at least like 8 to 10 hours. Just open Atlantic Ocean kind of thing, and now I think maybe they've got it down to like 6 to 8.
Okay.
But if you go in the winter, you could get stuck in ice. You could literally be out there for days. Either that or you fly, and there's only like 2 airlines in Canada, so the pricing is not that great. So yeah, it's the kind of place where you can't like pop over for a weekend, because you're just wasting your money, and then you end up like barely seeing anything. So it's an adventure trip that like I would recommend at least a week to 2 weeks, and it's well worth it, as long as you're okay with maybe some overcast weather and not seeing the sun.
I was just going to say, you're doing everything you can to turn people off the place, aren't you? Yeah, it's.
I mean,
I
well,
know your strategy.
well, but the funny thing is, like, I mean, a lot of people I know, like, I've been kind of chasing after a bunch of travel bloggers and everything lately, kind of, I'm dipping my toes in this sort of to start. And I've only seen maybe one or two that have actually gone there, and they totally loved it. But yeah, it's just, it's not quite as easy. And compared to, say, like Montreal or Toronto or like even Halifax, which is just like one province over, um, they're definitely more on the map, and it's a lot easier to kind of dip into any of those places and do a weekend or a week, and then you can take off and go somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, Newfoundland, like, you get to St. John's, that's the capital. Beautiful, beautiful city on like a good day. Like when the sun's out, St. John's is probably one of the places in the world that I'd love to be. Uh, but the weather can be kind of iffy, and then in order to get anywhere else, you pretty much have to rent a car, and renting a car on an island, it can be pricey. But then, like on the west coast of the island, you've got Gros Morne, which is a national park. I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a beautiful spot. There's like a natural fjord there, which I think is one of the only ones, at least in North America. Um, so there's lots of unique stuff. And then I know you mentioned my accent, but I actually don't really, at least as far as I know, don't really have the Newfoundland accent, and that's a whole experience of its own. Um,
Mm.
which, yeah, like when you go there, you may end up kind of having the interesting experience of knowing that people are talking English, but not quite understanding what they're saying. I thought I'd be prepared when I went to Ireland. Like that was my first international house sit when I started. And I thought, okay, I grew up in Newfoundland. There's a bit of an Irish influence. I'll be able to pick up on the accent, and I was wrong.
I just want to go back to what you said about travel bloggers and
Hmm.
that because I'm going to open a can of worms here. I was going to say most of them haven't been up there because they're all chasing the sunshine. They all go to these
Yep.
tropical beaches and islands around the world, and you don't find too many sitting in Bali who want to go up to Newfoundland in the middle of winter. Yeah.
No, 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 not at all. I mean, the funny thing is, like, I kind of left Newfoundland. I mean, I've been leaving Newfoundland off and on, like, pretty much ever since I finished high school. But, like, I left it last time and started traveling internationally, basically to kind of avoid Canadian winter. And they had an amazing winter in Newfoundland. Like, well, I don't know if maybe the people there would say it. They actually got like we're in a state of emergency for I can't remember how long it was. It was at least probably 4 to 5 days, if not more, because they got this massive dump of snow, like historical dump of snow. My sister was kind of stuck in her house for days. Like the city shut down, government offices were closed, schools were closed, everything for like a solid week. They had to get the military to come in, which was a big deal because in Newfoundland we've always kind of given given a bit of guff to Toronto because they had like I don't know what it was. I think it was like 10 or 20 centimeters of snow once, and they called the military in.
Mm.
And after traveling in cities and some of them in the winter, I get it. Like it's not as easy to clear the snow in a major city. But in
Mm.
Newfoundland, like 10 or 20 centimeters is like not even an overnight storm. It's like an afternoon storm. So it's not that big of a deal. So we'd always be like, oh, you bunch of babies. So to have to call the military in Newfoundland has to be a really big deal because you got to be able to have it, one up Toronto, right? And but yeah, I mean, so in the winter it can be amazing, but it's also like a coastal place, especially St. John's. So you get that sort of sloppy, rainy. One day it's cold and snowy, the next day it's kind of like cloudy and rainy, and so then you get ice on the sidewalks. And this is the part of winter that has me running away, but like growing up, I mean, we spent, weekends, we'd go to the cabin kind of inland and you'd just spend the day like snowmobiling in open country. And, most of what you would see would just be like caribou and rabbit and whatever. And like
Mm.
no buildings, very little people. And like that part of winter, I'd totally go back for it. But I think I've actually been outside of the country so long now that I went back like just under 2 years ago in the summer, and I still couldn't feel my toes. Like the whole time I was there, I was in jeans and a hoodie, and socks with the flip-flops because that's all I had. Meanwhile, my dad and my uncle are there with like no shirt on and shorts, being like, "Yeah, the summer's been great. It's so warm." And I'm like, "No, no. 25 to 28 degrees is like what I turn the air conditioner on, when I go to bed. It's not warm." So, yeah, it can be a beautiful spot, but it's a risky place to go. It's not quite the same as say going to like Bali or Southeast Asia, and you can
Mm.
kind of expect to see the sun pretty much every day.
Do you have a tourist commission office in St. John?
I personally don't. I actually, with the job that I quit before,
No, I mean, is there like a tourist
oh yeah,
commission
yeah.
office in there is, okay, because I'm going to send them an invoice for the last eight minutes of my show that you've just taken to promote your part of Canada. And actually, I've got to say this. I'm going to change the name of my show because I've had so many Canadians on my show in the last three or 4 months, and I think we've gone from, well, we have now. We've gone from Vancouver right across to Newfoundland and everything in between to promote Canada.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna get on. Actually, I might speak to your president. What's his name? Trudeau. Yeah, I've got to speak to
Yeah.
that guy about the global travel channel can be called Podcast Canada. How about that? We change it to Podcast Canada. That'd be lovely.
I'll I admit it's all part of our secret plan. We're all getting paid a small commission. We were all told to go
Yeah.
on and pace ourselves, not to make it seem too good, but you caught on, so I guess I overdid
It's
it.
it sounds like you have. Okay, we've got to move on because we've got
Yeah,
to talk about a lot of other things. But thank you for promoting your beautiful country. I enjoyed it, and
that's that's
I'm sure my listeners did as well.
that's what I'm paid for.
So I'm just looking at my notes here, and my first question was, tell us about Canada. So you've just done that. Now listen, all my guests get the opportunity to dedicate the episode to somebody special in their life. So
Mhm.
who would you like to dedicate this episode to today?
I think in the hopes of creating a quiet space, I'm going to dedicate it to the three dogs that I'm hanging out with right now, who are peaceful and quiet currently, and I hope they stay that way for the rest of the show. So I'm going to send it out to them.
Fantastic. Okay. What are the names of the dogs?
There's Jet, Rusty, and Tam.
Jet, Rusty, and Tam. And what
Yep.
breed of dogs are they?
Oh, let me see. I think I always get this messed up. Tam is, I want to say a golden Labrador, um,
Hmm.
but it might be a golden retriever. I should know this. I've been sitting them off and on for like 3 years. Um, and Jet and Rusty, I I mean they're all like rescues, so they've kind of got like a mix
Yeah, a
of
bit of everything.
yeah. I mean they're wonderful dogs though. Like I said, it's been 3 years, so I kind of I
Yeah.
love them all. I'm just hopeful that they're gonna show me some respect and keep it down.
Well,
Hopefully.
you've got Jet, Rusty, and Tam, and I've got Oscar sitting here next to my feet. So we've got 4 dogs on the show today. That's a first for the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Oh, awesome.
Another Canadian and 4 dogs. There we go. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Okay, well, thanks for dedicating it to them. That's very special, and I hope they appreciate it.
hopefully.
So we're going to talk a lot about house sitting today, and a lot of my listeners. I did a show way back, actually, right near the beginning of my podcasting adventure, and I spoke to a lady, and surprise, surprise, she was Canadian. We talked about house sitting, and when I came across you, I thought, oh, it's time to do another show on house sitting because there's a lot of people out there who are interested in traveling the world and doing it on a budget and doing it in quite of an innovative kind of way. And I think that house sitting definitely falls into that category. But before we get into the real house sitting side of your story,
Hmm.
why don't we start off learning about you and in particular travel? Can you remember your first overseas travel experience?
Um. Oh, okay. Overseas, I was thinking maybe you'd say international, which would definitely be the States, but I feel like it doesn't count that much because we're
Yeah,
just
let's
next
go
door.
beyond the US. So let's go
Overseas.
somewhere where you really went on a big trip. Yeah,
Yeah.
where was the first place?
Funny enough, it actually probably would be here in Thailand. I think it was at least 12 years ago. I was lucky enough to get involved as a youth facilitator with a nonprofit back in Nova Scotia. And they were headed to a conference here called the Gross National Happiness Conference.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, they thought I was a good pick to be involved. And of course, when someone says, "Hey, do you want to work with youth and go to Thailand?" And
Mm.
usually, I mean, I guess some people would say no, but I definitely was like, "Yes, yes, I will do that." I had to get the passport and everything. Like I just, wasn't prepared because, I mean, at that time, like going to the States, you could just cross over with like a whatever provincial driver's license or like some sort of regular ID. So yeah, I had to get the passport and did the whole like I guess it would have been at least 30, 35 hours in travel, like flights and stuff. And
Wow.
it was I mean it was yeah, it was an interesting experience. A lot of it was a whole organized conference, so it was like I literally just got on a bus when they told me to, and then when they told me to get out, I didn't even know where I was in the country. Um I mean I've been here numerous times since, and there's still parts where like I have no idea where I actually was. I mean it was beautiful and great, but it was definitely a different experience than what I'm used to now, like just kind of being handled by other people and whatever. But yeah, that was the beginning of it, and I think I said to the group I was with, I was like, I'm gonna be back here. I think it was within 5 or 10 years. I was like, I'm coming back to Thailand,
Mm.
and yeah, I mean, obviously, I did it over and over again.
So looking back on that first travel experience now, because that's quite a undertaking to go that distance as your first travel experience or major travel experience. Looking back on it now, what made it so special for you? Was there just a whole range of different things that happened during that, like the whole food experience, the whole cultural experience? Was it kind of mind blowing for you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, there was everything. Like for one thing, like it was part of this conference that was just this sort of beautiful thing about like the gross national happiness concept and like this idea of not measuring like a country or an organization's progress through just like their wealth. So it was a lot of sort of, I mean, I don't want to say touchy-feely stuff, but sort of like hippie stuff of like, sustainability and the environment and youth and education and cultural wisdom and all that stuff. So just kind of being involved in all of that and like getting, we got to sit down with like a local family and like walk around their farm, and they made us a meal, and like so it was a different experience than say just going to Bangkok and going to Khao San Road and staying in hostels and whatever. Like, it was still controlled, but it was still like more of a this is Thailand versus here's the tourist spots. But I mean, on top of that, like I also, and maybe this is sort of set up a bad pattern. I was in the middle of some pretty terrible stuff with a relationship, and the trip happened like just before, and some bad stuff had happened, and we kind of put it on hold. And then I went on the trip, and that like helped take my mind off it for a while,
Mm.
and sort of showed me that like even even during times when like life can be bad or whatever, like life still goes on, and there's still these beautiful moments and like other people around, and you can be happy with them and da da da. And so yeah, I mean it was a lot of those cliches that people have, but um, I feel like it was also just yeah an amazing experience that obviously didn't turn me away from from traveling. So I'm super thankful for it, and we had a reunion conference. I guess it was like 2 years ago in Chiang Mai, and I was happy enough that I was still like within the region, so I was able to go to that too. And we actually caught up with some people that like, and most of us hadn't seen in like 10 years, so that was cool. Oh, I will say there was one other thing, but maybe this was more for that last conference. Also, just being aware of the fact that like there were people that attended the conference, I think in both cases, who were basically not maybe necessarily like risking their lives, but who had gone through a lot to get there. Whereas us being a group from Canada, not to plug Canada again, but like we got there on government funding. Like they helped fund the trip as part of like a international exchange or whatever. But meanwhile, we're sitting and talking to these youth who like are trying to have these activist movements in their country, and they're basically like having to sneak it because the government doesn't allow like organized, activism and whatever. And So that was also an interesting thing. It kind of like put me in place of like sort of how special it was to be in Canada, but also like how special so many other places were for different reasons.
Mm.
Um, and there you go. Yeah. So I didn't mean to plug the Canadian government, but
You did.
yeah,
Yeah.
weird.
I
I'm
might
usually
start
not.
taking. I might start taking notes actually. How many times you promote your country throughout this entire
Is this
podcast?
going to
Because
become a drinking game for people?
probably is.
Every
Yeah.
every time I mention Canada, just take a shot of maple syrup. I
Yeah.
don't drink, so I can't necessarily propose that, but yeah, a shot
I
of
don't
maple
think most
syrup
people will
maybe.
be able to get through the show at this pace.
Okay, I'll try and avoid it from here on, see if I can.
I've got to try to avoid asking you questions that have any relevance to Canada whatsoever. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
But it seems as though you're going to be able to tie everything back to Canada in one way or another.
Oh man. I read
So,
anyway.
so the conference was sounds like a bit of therapy for you as well with that whole relationship going on. I've always said that travel is the best therapy in the world,
Oh, I mean, it
and
it is, but it
mm,
isn't in some
mm,
ways. I find it
mm.
also lets you sort of escape it. Know what I mean? Like you also kind of are able to put it on the back burner in a way, but
Oh, you can run away from things when you
yeah,
travel,
oh, I
but
mean, I've been doing that lots of times, but but then on the other end, yeah, it gives you a bigger perspective, which I think helps because obviously, especially in the younger days, it all feels like the whole world's falling down, right? Like when that all
mm,
important relationship is crumbling, but when you travel, you kind of get to realize like, oh, there's a little bit more than just, you and that person.
we might have the whole show on this. I think people will be more interested in how to
Uh-oh.
run away from their relationships than they would be on house sitting.
Oh God, I could definitely talk about that. I got a degree in psychology and I never really used it, but some of
Mm,
my further travels involve bands and like I manage like music band or music groups. And I always told my parents that like even though I didn't use my degree, like I still, I was like the therapist in the van and like just dealing with a lot of people's crap and helping them get through it. And so yeah, the whole idea of running away, I mean, I've got myself and friends that I could definitely put in that category at different times.
Well, look, we're going to fast forward from your first conference in Chiang Mai to the end of 2014 because you made a life changing decision around that time.
hmm
And I'd like you to share with my listeners what that decision was, but also the time leading up to it. So, how did it come about and what was the lead up to that decision making process?
Well, so just to kind of, I guess, put the title on it, 2014 or the end of was when I quit my last full-time job and decided to kind of go my own way and focus on the magazine that I'd been doing. Before that, I guess part of the obvious thing leading up to it was that the job was going sour, like fast. Um, it was to the point where I actually thought I was expecting to get fired, and I was just sort of holding out because the contract I had gave me basically a bonus at the end of every year. Um, so I was just kind of holding out until I crossed that threshold, and then at least I knew I had like this bonus payment coming my way, and then I was starting to plan to quit. And yeah, it had just gone sour. I had actually moved back from South Korea, which I moved to sort of after a relationship. I was still working with the agency, sort of long distance, doing small stuff, and they convinced me to move back to Newfoundland. I again convinced them to let me work from a different province. And it was going well for a while, but I was the only one outside of the office. So, and when there was stress and anything kind of happened, it sort of fell on me. And trying to communicate with people when there's some anger and like whatever and stress and not being in the office made that hard. So like I'm glad we're not doing this over Skype because I'm still kind of conditioned. Like I think they've changed the sounds over the years, but like just being on Skype stresses me out because that's how we communicate it day to day.
Oh,
And
wow.
if I heard
Mm,
that message like that ding, I'd just be like, oh no, no, please no. So the job got really bad. And let me see, and I had a relationship that ended. And then I had two good friends of mine, one of whom I had actually moved like to South Korea with. They were moving down to Costa Rica and they said to me, look, we're going to have a room. If you want to rent it, it's like 250 a month. Come down with us. It's up to you. And I was just like, all right. I've got a chance to go to Costa Rica. My relationship is ended, so I'm not moving to live with her, and my job sucks. Yeah, I guess I'm moving. And I called my parents, and the kicker was I called my parents and I said, "Look, I think I'm going to quit." They had been up to visit me just before that, and they saw sort of how stressed out I was. And when the two of them agreed with me and didn't really say like, "Well, what about your future?" and like it's a good paying job, like what are you going to do? And when they agreed and they were like, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea," I was like, "Who?" I had two reactions. One was, "Oh my God, I've broken my parents." Like they've finally given up on me being kind of quote unquote normal. And the other was like, "All right, I guess, yeah, it is this bad and I should do something else." So yeah, I emailed my boss. I think it was like the day that my project manager literally told me to just shut up and do the work. And like when I came back from South Korea, I came back to kind of be like sort of an advisor because the company I worked for before that was dealing with much bigger clients, and I sort of had a knowledge that I felt I could help this agency with.
Mm.
And so I
What were
was
you
on.
doing? What was the
Um,
job?
well, I was the copywriter, but it was a small agency, so like, my buddy who was the senior developer there, like we were the two that would stay after hours with our boss to talk about like, okay, what are we gonna do down the road? Like, where's the agency going? And like, social media campaigns and marketing and stuff, and like, and we were the two that like did the jokes when he was gone away, like we did his office up like a beach with the palm trees and whatever, and so like, the community was there and it felt really good and there wasn't all the stress of the agency I was in before. But then we had the growing pains, we started getting a little bigger, and that's when people got stressed out, and suddenly everyone wasn't going home at 5, you were working late, and um, so it just kind of it lost that. And yeah, when I got told to basically just be a grunt, and I was like, wow, so you're not respecting me for the knowledge that I have and the experience. So I wrote him and I was just like, yeah, it's obvious, where the company wants me to be is not where I want to be. I'm giving you 3 weeks notice. If you need me to stay on longer to train somebody, we can talk about it, whatever, but there you go. I sent the email and I ran out of the house and like avoided my email pretty much the rest of the night. And then, yeah, he took it in stride and pretty much acknowledged that things were going bad. And they actually never did get me to train anybody. There was no big hoopla the day I left. He just had a call with me and sort of acted all nice. And since then, the bridges were burned because I had to fight with him over that bonus that I was owed. And every 2 weeks, I was waking up in Costa Rica and having to chase after him for the payments. But I mean, I don't regret it. My buddy actually ended up leaving like maybe a year or so later. Um, and yeah, the company's still going. And I mean, I hope the environment's better, but I'm definitely happier where I am,
Mm.
which is
Mm.
on the other side of the world.
So how did house sitting come onto your radar? What was the catalyst for that?
I feel like I came across it somewhere online, but my sister's going to say that she told me, and that's the story I stick with because maybe she'll beat me up if I don't say it
Mm.
differently. Um,
Is your sister older than you?
no, she's actually 2 years younger.
Oh,
I don't
well,
really know.
you can tell her it was your idea. She's not going to
Yeah, I
get it
mean,
over.
well, in the book and everything, I give her credit for it. So I think I'm
Mm.
gonna I'm gonna say it was her. I feel like maybe I had read about it before.
Is the book fact or fiction though?
Uh, well, she disagrees with me on a couple things because I had her read it over, and there was one or two things that she was like, "I don't remember you saying this." I was like, "I totally did." So
Mm.
I mean, leaning back on my psychology degree, I think it
Mm.
also depends on how valid you think memories are, because they can be a little shady at times too. So
Mm.
it's as I remember it. Let's say that. So I
Mm.
think it's fact.
Okay. So
Yeah.
your sister put you onto online house sitting site or something, did she?
Yeah, I think well basically what happened was I moved down to Costa Rica, and at that time uh I wasn't thinking I don't think I was really thinking house sitting. At that time the plan was that we were going to stay down there. One of my friends was there for university. There's the University for Peace, and so she was trying to do like stuff in terms of international development, and we basically went down there to kind of ride off her coattails and just hang out and figure life out and eat as much fresh fruit as we could. but it turned out to be a lot more expensive than we thought. Like we were expecting Southeast Asia prices, um,
Mm.
and it's not. I mean, it's still not like, prices like in the States or Australia or Canada, but you can definitely see the influence of like all the, well, we call them snowbirds, like all the Canadians and the folks from the States that go down there in the winter.
Mm.
Um, so the prices were a little too high, so our budgets were way off, and the university didn't turn out to be what she expected. So I had booked a flight home for Christmas because for some reason going back home in the winter seemed like a good idea. Um,
Mm.
so I left Costa Rica and flew back home, and that's when soon after my friends were like, "Oh, so yeah, we've left and we're now like in British Columbia." I was like, "Oh, so I guess I'm not going back to Costa Rica." So suddenly I was spending the winter in Newfoundland after like 3 months in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and I was like, "This is not where I want to be." So that is when I think the site that I use, they usually have a sale around Christmas, like around the holidays. So I think they had a sale on, I believe my sister was house sitting at the time, like just locally in St. John's. And so maybe through whatever Facebook system, they started showing her these ads and everything. And I think that's how she came across it, was she read about it like on Facebook or something. And so she sort
Uh-huh.
of pitched the idea to me that she was like, well, you could do this house sitting thing. And they had a sale on the membership. And I think I signed up sometime while I was in Newfoundland. And then I just sort of made the plan of how I was going to get myself to the other side of the country to start house sitting, and how ultimately that was going to lead to me, getting out of the country and seeing the rest of the world. And yeah, that
Mm.
was like 2014, early 2015, I guess. That was it in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. So what I want to try and do today on the show is I want to try and kind of walk through the process of becoming a house sitter. So
Hmm.
I'm sure there's lots of people listening that want to kind of pick your brains and say, okay, well, how do I go about this? You've talked about a website that you went onto. How much did it cost you to sign up and become a registered member of that particular site?
So that one, which uh, I mean, I guess I'm plugging something else again. It's Trusted House Sitters. It
Hmm.
is definitely like the more expensive one. There are free ones out there. However, I find that one's like by far probably the biggest one. And I haven't actually used any others. Like I've just been busy through that one.
Mm.
So I think at the time it was probably about $120 Canadian for a year. Which I mean, obviously, like seems a little steep. Like it's a bit of a bite out of the wallet, especially if you're trying to budget travel. But
Mm.
when you compare that to, say hotels or even hostels, I mean, even in this part of the world, I was paying for a decent hostel where I didn't end up with all the backpackers who were out till 4 in the morning drinking and partying. You're looking at least maybe $8 to $10 a night. So, like, what, a week and a half of staying in a hostel, not counting,
Mm.
say, if you stay in a hotel, it's obviously going to be more. That's
Mm.
already like $120 to $150.
Mm.
So, in that end, I mean, I was like, that's okay, fine. It hurt the wallet when I did it, but I mean, ever since then, I've had no issues about renewing my membership because, like, once things got going, I mean, I've just been saving so much money. Like, I haven't paid rent in 5 or 6 years. So,
Yeah.
it's well worth like $120 a year. I mean,
Yeah.
getting started, like, if you want me to get into that now, the getting started is definitely rough. Because, like, it's kind of like any job, right? Like, when you start off, you don't know what you're doing, you're the newbie. No one wants to like give you the responsibility. And um, I mean, I was basically going up against like retired seniors that had these pictures and had spent years or decades of like living with animals and traveling and da 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 da. And so, who are you going to give your home to, right? Like, are you going to give it to like, I don't know if you picked up that gecko then, but I apologize. Um,
No, that's all right. We want
okay.
all the sounds and lovely feelings we can get from Thailand. No problem.
Yeah, Southeast Asia, right? You can't avoid them.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but so like I was going up against these people who had like, years of experience and references and da da da. And this is another good thing about that site is that like I have a profile. So now like I have references and reviews and like, you also have the fact that like I've been paying for this. So there's a little less of that like random sort of drifter element of like people just being like, oh, I could get free place to stay, I'll sign up for that, and just doing the free sites and stuff. Like it can get kind of sketchy on the free
Mm,
sites on both ends, like house sitters and homeowners. Um,
mm, mm,
so to start off, like basically I just applied to everything. Like I planned a tour to promote my magazine down through the states and then up the west coast to get myself to British Columbia. And I had friends and family. Like I stayed with my friends who were living in Costa Rica, and I stayed with an aunt. So when I didn't get a house sit, like I had places to stay, which is definitely like an important thing because getting into this, it's not going to happen like right away. Like
mm,
you gotta
mm.
set up your profile. You gotta get some references outside of it, like even just to say like, yeah, they're trustworthy, they're honest, etc. And then basically you just spend your days just applying to whatever. It might not, they might not be the greatest sits, and they probably are like the scraps that other people don't want to do, but you need to start getting those, reviews, right? And the references so that later on down the road, people will be like, oh, this person's done like 5 sits and they're all 5 stars. So maybe, maybe that little lovely like week-long getaway on an island, maybe they'll look at you then. But in the beginning, you're kind of just going for anything. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I was
So,
basically applying for everything and just hoping. And if it didn't work out, I had somewhere to stay. If it worked out, then, I hopped on a bus or a boat and made my way to the place. It was all local though. Like at that time, I definitely wasn't like hop into a couple provinces over or whatever. It was all just based in like Vancouver and Vancouver Island. So like I kept my expenses low, and luckily BC is actually probably, in terms of Canada, BC and Ontario are probably the more popular places. So
mhm.
like I knew there was no way I could, I could do like the house sitting thing in Newfoundland because I think maybe even after all these years, I've seen like maybe a dozen listings over like the last 6 years for Newfoundland.
Mm.
So it definitely hasn't hit there yet. My sister's been kept busy like through sort of her local network, but in terms of like the websites and stuff, it's definitely Ontario and BC mainly.
So how long was it? So you basically set up a profile online, like I guess, like a Facebook profile, and you
Yep.
put details about yourself. So how long for you did it take from the time you'd finished doing that till you got your actual first house sit?
I want to say like a month or two.
Hmm.
I could be optimistic about that, or that could be it could have been less. Because I think I might have set things up before I even left Newfoundland. And then it wasn't until I got to BC that I actually started applying. But yeah, I think it was definitely like it was a while, and I applied for a bunch of different things and never really got anywhere. And then this couple just took a risk on me. I still don't know why, but I'm
Mm.
super thankful that they did. And it was like the most well, no, it wasn't the most stressful sit I've done. There's definitely been worse. But at the time, it was so intense because like I was just starting out and I really wanted that 5 star review. So like anything that happened, I was like, oh no, this is it. I'm not gonna get the review. And like if they wrote me instead of me writing them, I was like, oh my God, they think I'm horrible. Like I haven't been communicating enough and whatever. So yeah, it took, I'm gonna say at least like a month or two. And that wasn't
So,
like just sitting
mm,
around. That was like actively writing people and trying to get a gig and just having them not respond or having them turn me down. So it,
yeah.
it, it takes a while.
So walk us through the process of how you get to actually engage with the house owner once they contact you. Is there kind of like a Skype call so you get to meet each other, you have a chat? How does it work as far as that engagement goes?
Yeah, to start off, like with trusted house sitters, usually the way it goes is you can choose the countries that you're interested in. And so when I first started, actually, you would get an email anytime a listing from those countries came in, you'd get an email about it. And so then you could hop on and apply, like, probably within minutes of them posting it, which I think is how I got some of the sits early on. Now they send out like a daily digest, so it'll just be like a listing of, say, like for me right now, it's like Thailand and Cambodia and Malaysia and Vietnam and whatever. So basically, you get those listings, and from there, I mean, it's kind of like online dating, basically. Like you just go on, you look at the homeowner's listing, and it'll usually say, okay, like here's where we live, here's who we are, and here's the animals and sort of the rough idea of what you're gonna have to do. And then if the homeowners have been doing this for a while, they'll actually have reviews too from house sitters. And so then you look over all of that and you say, okay, you know what? This looks like a good sit. It doesn't involve like ostriches or horses or something I don't have experience with. So then you just go, you click apply and you just write them a message. In my case, I've usually written pretty simple messages because I'm confident in the profile I have, like that it breaks everything down. And I basically just say like, hi, I've got experience with cats and dogs. I also know the area well. If you think I'd be a good fit, I'd love to talk with you further. And then let me know if you have any questions. And then if they write me back and they're interested, then yeah, typically I would push for a Skype chat if I'm not within the same area. If I am in the city, then I would probably say, hey, let's meet up for a coffee or something. If they're comfortable with it, then maybe we'll meet at their home because obviously you also want to meet the animals and see,
Yeah.
how you get along with them. And that to me is definitely the better option because then you also get, the homeowner gets to see you with the animals, and so they can be, they can kind of decide from there. Yeah, and so then you just do that, and like I said, just like online dating or whatever, from there, you just hope that it went well,
I
and
was
and
going to
they'll,
say, I really hope it's not like the online dating scene because there's some horror stories out there about that.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, what about the confirmation process? Is there like a contract agreement that has to be signed, or how do you get to that stage?
I mean, technically, Trusted House Sitters has like an agreement. I don't know if most home. It's kind of like the terms of use, like every website. Like I think people just go like, yeah, okay, that's cool, and they just agree with it. I'd say 99% of the people I've dealt with, it's just okay, cool. Like, we liked you. Do you want to do this? And then that's it.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of the people that I've dealt with have been doing it for a while, so they've had some house sitters, they're familiar with it, and like the people signing up and paying for it, like they're open to the idea to begin with.
Yeah, yeah,
So they're not super hesitant. I mean, I've definitely met people, and when my family tells people what I do, everyone's like, "I what? I would never have somebody come in my home. That's so weird," and that sort of idea. So there is technically an agreement that Trusted House Sitters has, like a outline kind of, you're expected to do this, they're expected to do that, da 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 da. And they've since, I think in the last year, maybe the last 6 months, they've actually started offering insurance. So for any sit booked through them, I think it's mainly to benefit the homeowner. There is like an insurance policy to cover, say, like damage or I think theft and fire. I mean, don't take my word for it. There's probably, I don't know if I'm covering everything, but there is like sort of a coverage. And there's
mm,
also, for me as a house sitter, I can go through like a verification process, like to provide proof of ID and everything through the site, and so that'll come up on my profile, saying that like I've done these checks and everything. Um, I think I've had one or two house sitters that wanted me to sign a contract, and maybe a couple that there were stipulations where, like, say, if it was in the winter, when I was in BC, like if the heating bill went over so much, then I would be responsible for that. And I mean,
mm.
there's definitely listings, like I've seen them, and you can kind of get a feel for the person based on how they write their listing. And so
Yeah,
some people will be very specific, like they just seem like they're very kind of like they don't seem super comfortable with the idea, and it's like, okay, we expect you to pay for the electricity and this and that and everything else, and like don't go in this room and don't do this and don't do that. And so I usually avoid those now because I'm not trying to
yeah,
pick up the scraps. But
yeah,
yeah, for the
yeah.
most part, I mean, at this point, I've done sits uh, just like last year. No, wait, maybe it was, yeah, I think it was last year. I did a sit with a woman in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. I still haven't actually met her. Like I wrote her and it was her first time being on the site, and she saw like, I mean, at this point I've got like 30 or 40 5-star reviews. So some people are just like, oh my God, like if you want it, it's yours. Some people don't even write me back. I don't know
Mm,
what
mm,
happens, but
mm, mm.
so she saw my reviews and she was like, look, if you want to do it, you're more than welcome to do it. And she was in like a service department, so basically she was already out of town. I just went to like the lobby, got the key and the passcode or whatever, went and did the sit. When I left, I just dropped it off at the lobby. And yeah, I've never actually met her. Like we talked back and forth a bunch and she was super comfortable with everything. But I mean, yeah, so some people are totally okay with it, like super chill. Other people, will check in like every hour and want like Skype calls and all that stuff. So it kind of
Yeah,
depends, but there's definitely Trusted House Sitters definitely has some coverage for both sides.
yeah, yeah.
And they've got like a vet helpline. I think it's available like 24 hours a day and everything. So I've been pretty impressed with them. I mean, some people say their customer service is a little iffy. Their website could definitely use some work, but
Mm.
when in terms of like what you get your money, like if you get your money's worth out of it, I think you definitely do. Like once you start getting sits, I think it works out pretty well.
Have you ever had a situation where you've done this agreement, you're on your way to do the house sit and the owners pull the plug on you? Has that ever happened?
No, I think I've had one or two sits where maybe plans changed. I ended up with a couple roommates during some, just because maybe one
Mm.
person of the
Mm.
couple decided actually to stay back. But then in that case, they were like,
Right.
look, we don't want you to have to be put out. So if you want to stay there, you can. He'll be gone during the day, and you can just kind of take care of the dogs. So, yeah, I mean, I think pretty much all of my sits, I don't think any of them have fallen through. There's just been some slight plan
Right.
changes, but yeah, everyone's usually been super like accommodating if something changes.
Yeah, cool. Now, from a financial point of view, obviously you save a lot of money when it comes to rent, but what are the outgoings that you would actually typically pay for on a house sit? So if you have to travel to the other side of the world to do a house sit, who pays for
The
what?
understanding is usually that you'd be paying for that. So, I mean, because if you're applying for a sit on the other side of the world, like you kind of have to be able to take that expense on because, I mean, no one's forcing you, right? Like you could just apply locally. So, yeah, I mean, in pretty much every case, maybe because I've developed relationships with some homeowners now, they've offered to pay for some expenses and cover for some things to get me to go there. But sort of
Hmm.
the general understanding is that, yeah, you're going to pay for the expense to get there or visas or whatever. Outside of that, usually they would pay for like, the electrical bills, cable, internet, whatever. Sometimes there'll be a vehicle available. Um, and most homeowners will also leave like a bit of petty cash, mainly in case there's like an issue with, say, the vet or whatever. But in case you need to get stuff like, I don't know, I mean, toilet paper or gas for the vehicle or that sort of stuff, it's usually that's kind of covered. But yeah, in general, the big ones probably for me would be like flights and if there's any sort of visa application I have to do.
What's the first thing you do when you arrive at a new house sit project? What's the first thing you typically do?
I would want to say probably say hi to the animals, but outside
Hmm.
of that, probably check the cupboards to see what I'm working with. Because my deal is that like
Hmm.
if food's gonna expire, I'm gonna eat it. If it's not gonna expire, I'll probably leave it. Like everyone's usually like whatever's in the cupboards, go ahead and eat it. But I'm also vegan, so there's usually a lot of stuff that I just won't eat. Um, but yeah, usually I'll
Mm.
pick through the cupboard and see because yeah, I've been on a budget for a long time, so like depending on the house sit, sometimes there's some really cool stuff that like I normally wouldn't be eating. Like peanut butter is a wonderful luxury around this part of the world. So but I'll usually if I see it with the homeowner, I'll be like, so is that dog peanut butter or people peanut butter? Because I mean, depending on the animal, like if you got to give them pills or whatever, sometimes the peanut butter is for the animals, and sometimes you're just putting your finger in there to put it in the dog's mouth. So I just want to make sure what kind of peanut butter I'm working with usually.
Yeah, good. Very, very good question. What do you need to be an animal lover to be a house sitter?
I think it definitely helps. I mean, I'd say 90% of the people I've dealt with are like definitely um, just, I'm going to change it to dog and cat lover
Mm, mm.
because again, with the vegan thing, not to get super militant, but I have a bit of an issue with saying you're an animal lover and eating a bunch of them. Um,
Mm.
so dog and cat lover, yes, like by far the people that I've sat for, I mean, have spent, would willingly spend thousands of dollars on their animals, like to move them across the world or to take care of them at the vet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the animals are like first and foremost the priority, and I think you definitely have to have an understanding of that. Like, I know people who have had house sitters come in who that was not a thing. Um, and you can just tell, right? Especially if you meet the homeowner and you're there with the animals.
Mm.
If you're not, like for me, it's like I'll immediately get down on the floor and be talking to the animals and like hugging them and everything. And
Mm.
if you're just like, oh, cool, 3 dogs, okay. So, what's the deal with the pool? That's not going to go over well with most people.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it because, I mean, on top of that, if you're doing this full time, you're going to end up in situations where if you don't love those animals, they're going to be a major pain in the ass. And you're just going to be like, oh my God, why am I doing this?
The
Because,
animals must love it. Like if I was one of 3 dogs, I'd be saying, right, guys, we're getting a new house sitter and let's test them out, right? You could have all sorts of fun.
oh yeah, I mean, I did a sit here actually last year where the homeowner, one of them stayed back for like, I think it was 3 or 4 days, because they had other house sitters, and they knew that one of the animals would very much try and be the alpha. And so they had to be around for that transition period before that dog realized, okay, I'm not the boss. I'm not going to be able to push this person around. And it
Right.
was true. Like I could see it happening. Like if I went to get the leash, he'd nip at me and just try and be like, "Yeah, no, I'm going to intimidate you." And the homeowner would be like, "No, like you have to put him in his place." And once that happened, totally fine. He was a big baby. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like because I mean, plus you got the stress of like the homeowners are leaving, so that's a whole thing. And suddenly there's someone new. And I mean,
Yeah.
I've had dogs that even when I went to interview, like they just sat there and barked at me. One of them actually like one of them almost bit me, but it was my mistake. I was like, I held a treat, and I kind of put my hand behind their head, and
Yeah.
obviously they were like, "Whoa, no!" And but once the homeowners left,
Yeah.
and I gave the dog a bit of space, within like a couple hours, I was doing belly rubs. Like
Yeah.
it was just a thing of trying to figure out like the position of everybody and like
Yeah.
protecting the homeowners and all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
you can get some misbehaving, but generally everything works out once they realize who's going to feed them.
Yeah.
I
They're,
think
they're,
it
they're,
turns
they're good.
around.
Yeah. So, what's something that's really funny that's happened to you when you've been house sitting? You've got a really funny story about something really weird and peculiar that happened when you were house sitting once?
Oh my God. I mean, funny now, maybe not so funny then. I've locked myself out a couple times. Um, the the first time was in Toronto, on like Father's Day, and I had to go to the neighbors and be like, "Hey, so I know you don't know me, but like I'm supposed to be house sitting in the house next door here." Uh, and my phone was almost dead, and I was like, I don't think I even had a cell plan at that time. I was like, can I use your phone to call a locksmith? And they're just like, okay. And so then I called the locksmith, and this all makes sense when I think about it, but at the time I was like, I'm going to call a locksmith, it'll fix everything. I call, and of course the locksmith is like, so do you have proof of ownership of that place, or like a lease or anything to show that you belong there? And I was just like, no. Which makes sense. I mean, why would a locksmith just
Yeah,
go and open a
absolutely.
door for somebody? So he was just like, yeah, no, I can't really do anything for you. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And he was
Uh,
like, so the best thing I can tell you is that you need to make friends with someone who knows how to open windows. And I was just like, yep, okay, I got you. And so then I, hand the phone to the people next door. And I was like, all right, so they can't do anything. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. And I was like, yeah, it does. Um, and I said, so I guess we just got to try and figure out how to break in. And luckily, we came to realize that the windows in the basement were like those sort of 4 or 5 panels, like sliding ones.
yeah.
And apparently, they're really easy to take out. Like you just lift up and pop them out.
Right.
And so I'm there, like squat on the ground in like not a super busy part of Toronto, but busy enough. Thankfully, I had the neighbors with me, but it's just like two guys popping window panels out of like a basement window.
And climbing in.
Um, yeah, and then I had to like sort of squeeze myself in through, and luckily the washing machine was just below. And then I got in and I went over and yeah, but the funny thing is the homeowner had warned me about it. Like she was like, "Look, I've only got one key. It's to the back, like to the deadlock on the front door, but I leave the back door open. So
Yeah.
whenever you go
Yeah.
out, just do that." And of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
in my head, I was like, oh, I mean, I'm in Toronto. I don't want to leave the doors open and have someone break in. And I was like, well, I've got the key to the deadlock on the front, so I'll be fine. Yeah, I didn't know that the door handle was one of those that, you lock on the inside, you can walk out, and when you close it, it locks. So yeah, that was fun.
Tell me about house sitting, because there's an impression out there that when you do a house sit, you actually connect more with the local community because you're living in someone's house in a neighborhood, and all that stuff's going. Would you agree with that? Would you say that it's more interconnected with the local community than say when you stayed in a hotel or something else?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it kind of depends on like the homeowners too, and sort of how they've been involved in the community. I mean, I've done sits where I've just been out in the middle of the woods and like I haven't seen another person for, like the whole time I was there. But yeah, like in terms of like when I get there, that same sit, the people were like, look, if you go over here, like there's a hiking trail here and like another one on this way and da 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 da. And so like it was wonderful because I knew all these sort of local things. Um, and then yeah, I mean most of the sits I've been in, like they're, people a lot, it's pretty much all foreigners. But a lot of them have been around for a long time. Like the woman I'm sitting for now, she's been in Chiang Mai in the region for I think over like 15 years.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, like she knows this neighborhood, and again, it's a little remote, but still, like I'm shopping at like a local market that's every 2 weeks under like a bridge. Um, there's a woman that runs this little like sort of open air restaurant who like she knows that I'm here for this woman, and she knows me, and like I haven't been here for months, but I go over there and she's like, "Oh yeah, you're the veg guy, right? Okay, no problem. No fish, no eggs, no
mm,
problem."
mm, mm.
Um, and so yeah, it's just great, and like luckily I've been doing a lot of sits here that have kind of been repeat sits.
Yeah,
So I've also been able to kind of continue those connections. Like some
mm,
of the caretakers, I know them. In Phuket, I usually spend my Christmas holidays down there. The couple's actually moving now, so that's not going to happen anymore. But like the caretaker there, she knows me. I mean, we talk on WhatsApp every so often just to say hi, and she
yeah.
sends me pictures of her cats and stuff. And so yeah, I think it definitely helps because I mean, if you're just gonna like stay in a hotel in like the tourist area, I mean, a lot of places you're not gonna get that real experience. You're just
Yeah,
gonna get
yeah.
ripped off paying a lot of money for cheap sunglasses, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
just not the same at all. So yeah, I
So,
definitely recommend it for that.
so how long do you anticipate you're going to do this lifestyle for? What's the plan?
It's kind of funny. Like I put out this book, and I'm sort of semi-retired now. I have a partner in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and so when I go there, like I've been staying at her place, and part of the reason I started doing this was to like avoid paying for hostels and hotels. So
Mm,
now obviously I want to be spending time with her, and I don't have this need to be trying to avoid, rent. So I'm kind of pulling back a bit. Like I'm doing this sit now because it's for a woman that I've dealt with before, and she's just in an unfortunate situation that she needed to be back in Australia. Um, After this, I'm probably going to be more picky. Like, if I do pitch to do a sit, I ask if my partner can come with me. And so I've done a few in Ho Chi Minh City just to kind of like go to different districts and get a different feel for places.
mm.
Um, but I mean, in terms of like keeping my profile and everything, I don't plan on stopping. Like the way I'm looking at it is that I've got it to the point now where a lot of the sits I apply for, people are like, yeah, like you seem to have a great record. If you want it, you can have it. So, I mean, even if I pull back on this and like we just end up going, okay, we want to do a vacation for 2 weeks,
Mm.
then I have this option to say, okay, where do we want to do a vacation? Okay, Italy, like let's start looking a month or two ahead, or maybe a few months ahead,
Yep.
see what sits are available for Italy. If we get it, we get it. If we don't, maybe we can go somewhere else. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, for me now, like now that I've built it up, um, I I plan on kind of keeping it for as long as I can,
So
because
it's taken you essentially 5 years to get to the stage where you can now pick and choose what parts of the world you can go to and be more or less guaranteed that you're going to get some kind of house sit option there.
I mean, I well, the last 3 years have been in Southeast Asia, so I
Mm.
think I'd say maybe it was at least like it took me about a year where I spent most of it in BC, and then I started heading east with, and I booked a sit in Toronto, spent some time at home, and then I think I had booked a sit in Dublin, and then I kind of filled in the gaps like in Europe, and then eventually I made my way here. Spent the last 3 years here, and have been kept relatively busy. Um, but yeah, I'd say it was at least a year and a half, maybe two, before, and I mean, it kind of just depends on how many sits you get, right? Like the frequency.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I did some sits in BC. Like one sit I did was like 3 months long.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, that kind of kept me from doing other sits.
yeah.
So it kind of depends, like, and it also depends on where you want to go. Like, if you want to go to, say, London or New York, I am probably not I'm quite confident I'm not guaranteed to get whatever sit I apply for there
Yeah,
because
right.
everybody wants to go there. Whereas like here in Southeast Asia right now, it's definitely getting more popular. Like I see in Thailand, there's typically between at least 4 to 8 sits at any given time.
Right.
Around sometimes it could bump up to like 10 or 15, if not more. Um, so if I want something in Thailand, I can definitely get it. But I mean, I'm still not batting 100. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I wrote to, I had one person invite me to a sit without me even applying. I
Right,
wrote them back and asked if my partner could come, and they didn't even respond. Like
right,
they
right.
didn't even write me back. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's still hit or miss, but I mean, I'd say like in the last, well, since I got here 3 years, I'd say I've spent maybe in total like 2 months in hostels and stuff. And then obviously since I started seeing my partner, it's a
Yeah,
little different. But yeah, I mean, I kept pretty busy, and this is like not a super popular spot for sits. So
yeah,
I'd say, yeah, after you get maybe like, if you can get 10 or more reviews, then you're probably doing pretty well.
yep,
So it just kind of depends on how quickly you can get them.
right. Now, at the beginning of the show, you spent quite a bit of time plugging Canada, and we've arrived at the end of the show. So now you can start plugging your book. So, do you want to tell people about your book?
Yeah, sure. My book's all about Canada. No, not at all. That's my next book once I talk to Trudeau and the tourism industry.
Yeah, yeah,
No, so the book basically, to be totally honest, as much as I feel like maybe I've been kind of giving the positive here for house sitting, last year was super rough for me because I've been doing a bunch of like consistent sits. This one specifically, originally when I started with this sit, there were 6 dogs. So over the last roughly 3 years, 3 of them have passed. Uh, One, I was actually here. The homeowner was here as well, so that was both good and bad. One passed just recently due to a snake bite. Another one passed a while ago. So I dealt with like 5 animals passing, I think, last year between like 2 sits that I've done. So that was sort of a reality that I hadn't really faced with house sitting. So I decided I wanted to just kind of put my experiences out there to give people kind of, well, yeah, the reality of
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
going to do it long term, just in the same way if you're going to bring an animal into your life, like you have to deal with the fact that at some point that animal's going to leave. Um,
yep,
and so I wanted to really put that in perspective for people, but I also wanted to talk about the fact that like it's a job. I mean, as much as when I do immigration, I don't apply for a work visa, so I don't consider it a job that way.
mm,
But like this isn't the kind of thing you want to do if you're planning on, say, coming to Chiang Mai and spending your whole, say, 2 weeks going to all the temples and eating all the food and everything, when meanwhile there are animals that you're supposed to be like, taking for walks and feeding and spending the night with.
yeah,
Like, there's a responsibility to it, and there are expectations that you have to be able to meet, and there are downsides. I mean, I've been up at 3 or 4 in the morning dealing with dogs barking or being sick. I've had to force feed pills and just, a lot of different stuff. Um, so I wanted to put that all in the book. I'm not going to say the title. I don't know what your your language requirements are, but I think
I'll
that
put it in the show notes for the people anyway.
okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, it's a tongue-in-cheek thing, but I just wanted people to realize that yeah, there's a downside to house sitting, but still, regardless of that, um, I don't regret doing it. I'm going to continue to do it on some level. And I think as long as people are aware of that, if they want to do it full time, it's an amazing option to be able to travel without having to have, a massive part of your budget go to hotels and hostels. And plus, I mean, you get to spend time with animals, which I think is great.
Yeah. I was going to say that the title of the book could have well been Canada, Beautiful Canada, but it's actually not, and it's something a little bit more, shall we say, slangish. That, as I say, I'll put a link of that
Yeah.
in the. Have you got a blog or something going that you're keeping track of all these house sitting experiences that people can read up about?
It's yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, like, this has sort of been a shift. Like, the book is kind of the beginning of a shift for me to kind of move a bit away from the magazine, which has been my focus. So
Right.
like all my travels and stuff have been on the YouTube channel for that.
Yeah.
If you just search Tofu Magazine on YouTube,
Yeah.
you'll find a lot of my travel videos and stuff. But I'm kind of shifting away to do more of a personal travel blog kind of deal. So that's just ryanpatey.ca. There's another Canada plug.
Another Canada
Um,
plug. Yeah.
but it's Patey. And yeah, so I'm gonna start writing more about the travel experiences, and hopefully I'm gonna try and have it as more of like an honest conversation around it instead of just being like, you know, travel's the greatest thing to change your worldview, and here's top 5 things to do wherever, because that's not how I travel. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess if people want to check it out, I promise that it'll fill up quicker over the next coming months, I guess.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now, my last question for you today is going to be this one. What has all the traveling experiences that you've had, whether it be with house sitting or the traveling that you did prior to house sitting, how's that changed you as a person over the years, do you think?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think there's the definite, like, it's opened my view of the world and everything. Like coming from small town Newfoundland, um, there's definitely I've seen a lot more, and I feel like I've become a little bit more compassionate. But to avoid that cliche, I want to say that it's also made me realize, like, even though, like I said, I've had these ups and downs and things that, have been pretty terrible and frustrating, the fact of the matter is that I still am able to do this. Like, it's made me aware of the privilege that I have to be able to just say, all right, I'm going to quit my job and, start this thing called house sitting,
Mm.
and people are going to accept me into their homes and this and that and whatever. Because, I mean, even here, like, not to kind of get into the finer details of it, but chances are, if people, like, say within Southeast Asia, like locals wanted to get into house sitting,
Mm.
it probably would be a lot harder because, it depends on their ability to speak English, and also there's sort of misperceptions that, like, foreigners have towards locals, and there's cultures involving, like, the animals and everything. So I'm a lot more aware of the privileges that I have, say, even being born in Canada, plug with my passport, and the
Mm.
strength that it has,
Mm.
and the fact that I, like, don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to go into a lot of countries. Um, so yeah, I think it's made me maybe more compassionate towards the differences and everything, and it's also made me aware of when I am, locked out and feeling frustrated and wondering why the hell am I doing this. I'm aware of the fact that I'm lucky that I even can. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a really nice point to end up with. I'm going to give you a tip though before you leave the show today, and the tip for you is we're talking on a Thursday. Your show's going to go live on my channels tomorrow, Friday, and on Monday I'm having a guest on my show who's talking about traveling, about relationships, online dating, how it works out. I'm going to strongly recommend you have a listen to that one because I think that you're going to be able to pick up some tips, but you're also going to be able to relate to probably a lot of stuff that my guest's going to talk about. She's
Hmm.
got an incredible story because she was on my show once before, and she's the what can I call her? She's the online dating queen of Florida, and her life has dramatically changed since I had her on my show, and she's going to come back and tell us about the success she had and why she's now moved to Arizona. so, yeah, I put that out there as a tip for you to have a listen to that one next week, Ryan, and see
Yeah,
whether there's anything in there that makes you relate to all of that. Listen, it's been
yeah.
fantastic having you on the show. We could have spoken for hours about the subject. In fact, I'm going to get you back again because I think there's a lot of things that we we haven't even crossed the surface with today. So thanks very much for giving me your time and to talking to my audience about house sitting, and obviously what a wonderful journey it's been for you, and may long that continue.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, and maybe give the pup a treat for behaving so well. I'm gonna give these dogs a little extra love too, because it went pretty well.
Yeah, they did great, and I'm going to get off the podcast now and write a letter to the Newfoundland tourist office and see whether I can get a commission check.
At the very least, see if they can bring you over there.
Yeah.
It'll be well worth it.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, enjoy Thailand for the rest of the day and for as long as you are there, and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again.
There you go. Well, if you didn't know it, that was Ryan Patey from Canada. Ryan talking to me there from Chiang Mai in Thailand about his extraordinary journey over the last 5 years of house sitting his way around the world. I hope you picked up some useful tips on house sitting, and maybe you're now going to get off your own couch and go out there and travel the world while looking after other people's homes. What a great way to get around the world and see the world. So that's it for that particular episode. If you're looking for more episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, just head on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You'll find all of our previous episodes there. You can download them, of course, from places like Apple iTunes under the podcast section, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and also from our Patreon page, which is called the Global Travel Channel. So check it all out and download them and listen to them in your own free time. And don't forget, if you want a new pair of sunglasses and you want to try something very cool at a great price, head on over to genepool.com, www.geanpoole.com, and check out the amazing range of Sun God sunglasses. They're all there for you to shop online and get them delivered anywhere in the world. Okay, well, until we meet again next time, my name is Mark Philpott, and I wish you all a very happy and safe bon voyage.